Hello everyone, welcome back to our emergency medicine channel. Today we shall be continuing with aortic dissection. Previously we had started with diagnostic evaluation and we had spoke about chest x-ray and transthoracic echocardiography was done, and today we shall be continuing with the rest. Starting with D-dimer. If D-dimers are elevated, the suspicion of aortic dissection is increased, and typically the level of D-dimer is immediately very high compared with other disorders in which D-dimer level increases very gradually. D-dimer yielded the highest diagnostic value during the first hour, and if D-dimers were negative, still aortic dissection variants like intramural hematoma and penetrating atherosclerotic ulcer must be still considered. This is a systemic review and a meta-analysis which was done with an objective to examine the evidence of using D-dimer levels in the emergent diagnosis of acute aortic syndromes to effectively reduce the chance of missing or misdiagnosing aortic dissection. The conclusion of the study was D-dimer levels had very high sensitivity but fair specificity for diagnosing aortic dissection. They can be best used as a negative marker for ruling out aortic dissection in patients with low likelihood of the disease. Next, coming to the other biomarkers, since aortic dissection affects the medial wall of the aorta, several biomarkers have been developed that relate to the injury of the vascular endothelium or the smooth muscle, that is smooth muscle myosin, and the marker that relate to the injury of the vascular interstitium is the calponin and the matrix metalloproteinase 8, and the marker that relate to the injury of the elastic laminae is the soluble elastic fragments of the aorta, and the marker that indicates the sign of inflammation is the tenascin C or the thrombosis. These markers are tested at the moment and have not entered the clinical arena yet. Next, coming to CT scan. CT is most commonly used imaging for the evaluation of acute aortic syndrome. Basically, it provides specific and precise measurement of the extent of the dissection, including the length and the diameter of the aorta. It also helps to differentiate between the true lumen and the false lumen. It helps to find the involvement of vital vasculature and the distance from the intimal tear to the vital vascular branches. The key finding of the CCT is the intimal flap which separates the true lumen as seen in this image. Next, coming to how to differentiate between the true lumen and the false lumen. True lumen is basically compressed by the false lumen and it is smaller of the two. It has an outer wall calcification. False lumen, it is larger, it has a larger lumen size due to the higher false luminal pressure. It has risk of rupture due to reduced elastic recoil and dilation. Acute angle is formed at the edge of the false lumen, which appears like a beak, hence termed as beak sign. A slender linear area of low attenuation may be observed in the false lumen, corresponding to the incompletely dissected media, which is known as cobweb sign. It has a lower density, contrast density due to delayed opacification. It may be thrombosed and seen as a mural low density, and it surrounds the true lumen in Stanford type A. Accurate discrimination between the true lumen and false lumen is very important to make clear which collaterals are perfused by exclusively by the false lumen, as well as it is important for the endovascular therapy consideration. Next, coming to transesophageal echocardiography, it has a greater sensitivity and specificity. It is as accurate as CT and MRI. But the drawback of this transesophageal echocardiography is that it requires operator's experience. It can be used bedside for unstable patients. It can be quickly performed and it is non-invasive. However, in obese patient, pulmonary emphysema and patient on mechanical ventilation, the accuracy of transesophageal echocardiography may reduce. Color Doppler transesophageal echocardiography using biplanar views has advantage of ease of spatial orientation and application, and it has more accurate visualization of the entry. Next, coming to MRI. MRI is very sensitive and specific, but it is rarely used due to wider availability of CT scan in the emergency department, and this is time consuming. MRI provides coverage of the entire aorta and the branch vessels and can characterize aortic wall changes in the setting of inflammation as well. Lastly, coming to aortography. Iotography is not used much today unless there are plans to repair the dissection using stents. Next, coming to ECG. ECG is often normal or patient may have non-specific STT changes, and in some cases patient may have ECG changes suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. And type A dissections can have ECG changes of STEMI as the dissection may progress to the coronaries. This is an ECG of a patient who presented with chest pain and back pain. This ECG showed STT changes in the RCA territory. This patient was evaluated with CT iotography and found to have type A dissection. Next, coming to aortic dissection detection scale. This is a scale which includes three parameters, that is predisposing condition, pain features and the physical examination findings. Wherein any of these positive among each column were given a score of +1. This is a bedside clinical tool for standardized pre-test probability assessment which effectively stratifies the risk of acute aortic syndromes. The factors included in the predisposing conditions were Marfan syndrome, family history of aortic disease, known aortic valve disease, recent aortic manipulations and known thoracic aortic aneurysm. And in pain features, they had abrupt onset, severe pain intensity, ripping or tearing pain. And in physical examination finding included pulse deficit, focal neurological deficit plus pain, any new aortic insufficiency, murmur plus pain, and if the patient has hypotension or shock. The presence of more than one marker within each of this group was given a score of 1 with a maximum cumulative score of 3 if all three were present. If the patient had a score of more than 1, aortic dissection is more likely to be there. Hence, patient must be further be evaluated with CT iotography and must be diagnosed. Integration of this scale with D-dimer may help to standardize diagnostic decision on advanced imaging for suspected acute aortic syndromes, balancing the risk of misdiagnosing and over-testing. In case if this scale had less than 1 score, D-dimer testing must be considered, and if D-dimer was less than 500, then acute aortic syndromes must be ruled out, and if it is more than 500 D-dimer, then patient must be evaluated with CT iotography, and if the scale was more than 1, then directly patient must be evaluated with CT scan. Next, coming to this is a recommendation for accurate CT diagnosis of suspected acute aortic syndrome, which was given on behalf of British Society of Cardiovascular Imaging, wherein they considered these factors: if the patient had high risk conditions as I spoke previously, or if the patient had high risk pain features and high risk examination findings. If patient didn't have any of these risk features, then patient was categorized as low risk. In that case, patient must proceed with other diagnostic consideration, and acute aortic syndrome must be reconsidered if no alternative diagnosis or unexplained hypotension or widened mediastinum on chest X-ray is seen. In case if any single of these high risk features was present, patient was considered as intermediate risk, and in that case first ECG must be done to exclude acute coronary syndrome, and chest X-ray must be done to rule out other alternative diagnosis. If still acute aortic syndrome was most likely than diagnosis, then CT scan must be considered. And if patient had 2 or more high risk features as given above, then patient was categorized as high risk, and in that case patient must be immediately taken for CT and surgical consultation must be given. Next, coming to the initial medical management in ED. Initial medical management mainly aims at controlling heart rate and BP. Heart rate must be targeted to a goal of 60 to 80 beats per minute, and the blood pressure must be targeted to less than 120 beats. Blood pressure must be targeted to the lowest that does not compromise the end organ function. Beta blockers must be considered first. In that case, short acting beta blockers, that is esmolol or labetalol, must be considered. Esmolol at a dose of 0.5 mg to esmolol at a dose of 0.5 mg per kg bolus must be given, followed by 50 to 300 microgram per kg per minute infusion, or labetalol must be started at the dose of 10 to 20 milligram bolus and then 0.5 to 2 milligram per minute infusion. In case if the patient had contraindication to beta blocker usage, then non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers must be used, that is verapamil and diltiazem. Next, coming to vasodilators. Intravenous vasodilators are useful as an adjunctive therapy after IV beta blockers, but must be avoided as an initial treatment as they have a potential for compensatory tachycardia. Nitroglycerin at a dose of 5 microgram per minute must be started, and if not effective can be increased by 5 microgram per minute every 5 minutes, and nicardipine must be started at 5 mg per hour, and if not effective must be increased every 15 minutes by 2.5 milligram per hour. Nitroprusside can be started at a dose of 0.25 to 0.5 microgram per kg per minute and then titrated accordingly. Pain control to counter sympathetic contribution to elevated heart rate and BP. In this case, intravenous opioids are more effective. Fentanyl and morphine can be used to pain control. Next, coming to the general recommendations for management. Surgical therapy is required if the patient has acute type A aortic dissection and a retrograde dissection into the ascending aorta. Surgical therapy and endovascular therapy must be considered if the patient has a type B aortic dissection which is complicated by visceral ischemia, limb ischemia, ruptured or impending rupture, aneurysmal dilation and refractory pain. And medical therapy must be considered if a patient has an uncomplicated type B aortic dissection and an isolated arch dissection. Next, coming to few of its variants, that is aortic intramural hematoma and penetrating atherosclerotic ulcer. Aortic intramural hematoma, it develops in the aortic media. It can be mistaken as thrombus in a non-aneurysmal aorta. It accounts for 5 to 25% of the acute aortic syndromes. It can complicate into hemopericardium, classic aortic dissection, aortic rupture or aneurysmal dilation. The recommended management is surgical therapy in this case. Next, coming to penetrating atherosclerotic ulcer. There is acute penetration of the atherosclerotic aortic lesion through the internal elastic lamina into the media. Patient may develop bleeding into the media or may progress into intramural hematoma. The complication of this is patient may have pseudoaneurysm formation, focal aortic dissection, aortic rupture or late aortic aneurysm. The management is endovascular therapy. Next, coming to disposition from ED. Type A aortic dissection require emergent cardiovascular surgery consultation as well as ED management of blood pressure and heart rate prior to the intraoperative repair. Patients who present with chronic aortic dissections are usually treated by blood pressure control and close monitoring, and all patients who have sustained and survived an aortic dissection require careful long-term treatment. So today's take-home points are if patient has chest pain associated with neurological symptoms or syncope, should increase the likelihood of aortic disease. Imaging is essential to establish or exclude the diagnosis of dissection. CT aortography is recommended. Requires emergent cardiovascular surgery consultation as well as ED management of heart rate and blood pressure prior to intraoperative repair. Hope this will be remembered. These are my references. Thank you.